Sarah walked into the house, a smile plastered on her face as she kicked off her heels. The familiar scent of fresh flowers and candle wax greeted her. John had always been good at setting the mood. Their anniversary was today, and while she had her own plans for celebrating later, she was curious about what he had prepared. As she stepped into the living room, she noticed a neatly wrapped box on the coffee table. A bottle of wine was chilling beside it, and the room had that cozy, romantic ambience she had come to expect from their special nights together. She sat down, eyeing the box, her curiosity piqued. John emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel, and gave her a casual smile. "Happy anniversary, babe." Sarah grinned. "You didn't have to go all out, but I'm glad you did." He shrugged nonchalantly, but there was something different in his eyes. "Go on, open it." She eagerly unwrapped the box, her fingers moving quickly, expecting something sentimental. Maybe a piece of jewelry or a thoughtful keepsake. When she lifted the lid, her heart skipped a beat. Inside were airline tickets and hotel reservations. Her eyes lit up. "Wow, you really outdid yourself this time," she exclaimed, holding up the tickets. "Where are we going?" John lingered in the doorway, arms crossed. "Actually," he said, his tone casual but sharp, "they're not for us." Sarah blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "They're for you and your boyfriend." His voice was even too calm for the weight of what he just dropped. He watched her reaction with a smirk tugging at his lips. Her smile faltered, and she let out a nervous laugh. "You're joking, right?" John didn't budge. "Nope. I've known for months now." The room fell silent. Sarah's mind raced as she tried to comprehend the situation. The tickets in her hands suddenly felt heavy. "You what?" she stammered, trying to regain control of the moment. "Yeah, I know. You've been seeing someone behind my back for a while now," John said, his voice still steady, as if he were discussing the weather. "I figured. Why not send you both off on a little trip?" Sarah stared at him, struggling to come up with an excuse, but nothing came. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. How long had he known? How could he be so calm about it? John chuckled softly, watching her squirm. "I thought you'd appreciate the gesture. After all, you've been making special memories without me for some time now. Consider this my contribution to your little affair." The casual way he spoke made her stomach churn. "But," she started, desperately grasping at any defense. "Hey!" John interrupted. "Don't worry. The hotel's nice. And first-class tickets, of course. Figured your lover deserves a little luxury after all the sneaking around." Sarah froze, still holding the tickets, unsure of what to say. Her anniversary surprise had taken a dark turn, and she was trapped in a situation she had never seen coming. John poured himself a glass of wine and sat down across from her. He raised his glass with a smirk. "To anniversaries, huh?" Sarah swallowed, her throat dry, as her carefully planned evening crumbled in front of her. Sarah sat still, gripping the airline tickets as if they were going to disintegrate in her hands. Her mind was spinning. The moment had shifted from excitement to dread in a heartbeat, and the weight of what John knew pressed down on her chest. "So, Sarah," John said, breaking the silence, "how long has it been going on?" Sarah's mouth went dry. She opened it to speak, but no words came out. He already knew, didn't he? There was no point in denying it. She set the tickets back down on the coffee table, careful not to look at him directly. John leaned back, watching her with a calm that unnerved her. "What's his name?" he asked, casually swirling the wine in his glass. She hesitated. "Nick." John nodded. "How original. The neighbor, right?" She clenched her jaw. There was no point in pretending anymore. A beat of silence passed between them, the air thick with unspoken words. John wasn't angry, at least not in the way she expected. He wasn't yelling, throwing things, or making grand accusations. That almost made it worse. "How'd it start?" he asked, like he was asking about the weather. She shifted uncomfortably, searching for a simple way to explain something so complex. "It just happened." She knew how pathetic it sounded. John raised an eyebrow. You just happened to fall on top of each other? She winced but stayed quiet. There was no good answer here. Just then, the oven timer went off. John stood up, walking casually to the kitchen. You know, he said as he pulled out a tray of perfectly roasted chicken, the aroma filling the room. You'd think after all this time sneaking around, I'd have burned dinner at least once. He placed the tray on the counter, grabbing a fork to test the chicken. But nope, still golden brown. I guess some of us are just better at multitasking. The joke hit harder than expected, and Sarah squirmed in her seat, clearly uncomfortable. John smiled, cutting a piece and taking a bite. Delicious, he said almost to himself. Maybe I should have made extra for Nick. I hear cheaters get hungry too. Sarah's face flushed with embarrassment and anger, but she kept her mouth shut. There was no winning here. He came back, still chewing on his bite of chicken, and sat down again, his calm demeanor never slipping. So where'd you two meet? His place or ours? At our place, she whispered, barely audible. Of course, he muttered, shaking his head with a small smile. I'm surprised the sheets don't tell stories. Sarah flinched at the remark but didn't respond. What could she say? John sighed, setting his plate aside. You know what the worst part is? I could have gone on pretending. But then you started coming home late, making excuses. And I'm not an idiot, Sarah. Her head hung low. She hadn't been as careful as she thought. So here we are. Happy anniversary, John said, sitting back down. There was a long pause. Sarah didn't know what to say, so she stayed quiet. The weight of her affair sat heavily between them, but John didn't seem interested in the details anymore. He looked at her, his voice soft but firm. You know what, Sarah? I could have made a scene. I could have thrown all your stuff out, kicked you to the curb. But I didn't, because this, he gestured to the tickets. This is how I get my closure. His eyes still locked on Sarah as she sat there, staring at the untouched chicken. He smiled, a little too brightly for the situation. Her fingers tightened around the edges of the table as if to ground herself. She couldn't understand how he was staying so calm, so collected. But John wasn't done. He picked up his wine glass again, swirling the liquid inside lazily before speaking again. You remember the day when we bought this house? His tone was almost nostalgic, but there was an undercurrent of something darker. She didn't answer, but he continued anyway. We were so excited back then. You had that big smile on your face, couldn't stop talking about the future, the garden you wanted, and all that. We spent the whole weekend moving in, and we had takeout pizza on the living room floor. Remember that? Sarah nodded slightly, the memory coming back to her in pieces. It had been a happy day. Their first home, full of potential and possibility. John smiled, but it wasn't a warm one. That night you told me something. Something I'll never forget. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. What was he getting at? You told me, John said, setting the glass down carefully, that I was your home, not this house. Me. You said it didn't matter where we lived, as long as we were together. You meant it, or at least you seemed to. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. Sarah felt her chest tighten, knowing where this was going but powerless to stop it. And now, he continued, I wonder if that was ever true, or were you always just waiting for something better to come along? The question hung in the air, heavy and sharp. John took another bite of chicken, watching her as if daring her to respond. He smiled, a little too brightly for the situation. Oh, I see you're not eating the chicken, he said with mock concern. No worries. I've prepared something to go with it. You're going to love this. With a casual stroll to the kitchen, he returned moments later, holding a small dish of roasted potatoes, perfectly golden and crisp. He placed it in front of her with a flourish. Roasted potatoes, he said with a smirk. They're simple, right? Solid, reliable. Kind of like what we had, or what I thought we had. Sarah blinked, her mouth half open, as if trying to figure out whether to respond or stay silent. She finally found her voice. John, you know it wasn't like that. Things just got complicated. John raised an eyebrow, chewing thoughtfully. Complicated? Is that what you call sneaking around with the neighbor while I'm paying the mortgage? She opened her mouth, but John cut her off with a wry smile. Because, Sarah, if that's complicated, I'd hate to see what a full-blown disaster looks like. Sarah winced but pushed forward, trying to regain some ground. You weren't exactly perfect either. You were always busy, always working, never around. John let out a soft chuckle, leaning back in his chair. Ah, so it's my fault now. Classic. I should have seen that one coming. Maybe I was working too much, but someone had to pay for those nice little dinners you and Nick enjoyed when I wasn't home. Sarah shook her head, frustration bubbling up. That's not fair, John, and you know it. John shrugged, still impossibly calm. Fair? Sarah, we're way past fair. This isn't a playground squabble about who gets the bigger slice of cake. He gestured toward the potatoes, smirking again. Or, in this case, the bigger portion of something dependable. She stared at the roasted potatoes, the symbolism not lost on her. They were solid, sturdy, something you could always count on. John was using them to make a point. He had been steady and dependable while she had been anything but. Sarah opened her mouth again, but John cut her off with another sharp comment. But hey, at least you picked a guy who lives close by. That's convenient, right? Less gas money. Gotta admire the efficiency. Her eyes flickered, anger mixing with shame, but John didn't give her a chance to respond. Sarah pushed open the bathroom door, her movements mechanical. She needed a moment away from John, from his biting comments, from the way he stayed so damn calm. She leaned over the sink, ready to splash water on her face, but her hand froze. Her things, they were all gone. She scanned the empty counter, the absence of her toothbrush, her face cream, even the small jar of hand lotion she always kept nearby. The realization hit her hard. John had wiped her out, erased her presence from their home, from the place where she used to belong. Her fingers gripped the sink tighter. He had packed her life into boxes without even asking, without a single warning. Rage flared up inside her, but she swallowed it down. She wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing her lose control. Steeling herself, Sarah walked back out into the living room. The air felt heavier, charged with the knowledge of what had just dawned on her. John was sitting at the table, casually cutting into a slice of pie as if this was just another night. Sarah stood frozen, her mind a whirlwind of disbelief. She had tried to wash away the overwhelming reality in the bathroom, but now, standing in front of John, it was clear. This wasn't just a fight. This was the endgame. She looked at him, the man she had spent so many years with. Now calmly cutting into a slice of pie like this was nothing out of the ordinary. "Oh, there you are," John said, his voice light, a dangerous gleam in his eyes. "Forgot to mention earlier. I packed all your stuff. Thought I'd save you the trouble of doing it later." Sarah blinked, her stomach twisting. "You packed everything?" "Everything," John replied casually, taking a bite of the pie. "Even threw in that face cream you love. Gotta keep up appearances, right?" He looked at her with a grin. "Sadly to say it, but I couldn't pack his things too. Entering someone else's house might get you thrown in jail." He chuckled, the sound sharp, cutting through the thick tension in the room. Her fingers clenched into fists, the anger simmering just beneath her skin. But John's calm demeanor only made it worse. She wanted to shout, to scream at him for being so cold, but he wasn't finished. John reclined in his chair, setting his fork down with a soft clink. "Oh, and please sit down. The cake's really delicious." He gestured to the slice in front of her with a mocking smile. "They say dessert's the sweetest part of the meal, but sometimes it leaves a bitter aftertaste. Just like this whole situation, wouldn't you agree?" He took another bite, savoring it as if the whole scene was some grand finale he'd carefully choreographed. "Go on, take a bite. Maybe it'll help you swallow the rest of this mess a little easier." She took a step forward, fists clenched. "You think this is funny, John? Treating me like I'm just disposable?" John didn't even flinch. "Funny? No, Sarah, I don't think it's funny. I think it's necessary." He paused, a small smile creeping across his face. Besides, you're not disposable. You're just relocatable. The casual delivery stung, and Sarah's eyes narrowed. You don't get to just pack me up and send me off like I'm some old piece of furniture you're sick of. John set his fork down, his gaze sharpening just a little. Oh, come on, Sarah. You already did the packing when you started sneaking around. I'm just helping you move along. Call it efficiency. The tension crackled between them, but there was an undeniable absurdity to the whole thing. John, calm and collected, playing this out like some bizarre theater, and Sarah, standing in the middle of it, trying to regain control of something that had already slipped away. Sarah's jaw tightened. And you're enjoying this, aren't you? Playing the cool, detached husband. Like none of this is fazing you. He smiled a little too brightly. Oh, I'm phasing, Sarah. Just not in the way you might have expected. He gestured toward the pie again. But hey, there's still dessert. Let's not ruin that. John stood by the table, casually sipping his wine, when he noticed Nick's car pulling into the driveway across the street. A slow grin spread across his face. Well, would you look at that? He muttered with amusement. He glanced at Sarah, who sat stiffly at the table. Our guest of honor has just arrived. Before Sarah could react, John flung open the front door and waved enthusiastically. Hey, Nick, come on over, man. Let's have a glass of wine. It's a special occasion. Nick froze in his driveway, looking bewildered. He hesitated, glancing around as if to check whether John was actually talking to him. But after a moment, he gave an awkward nod and started walking toward the house. Sarah stood up, panic flashing in her eyes. John, what are you doing? John's smile only widened. Relax, Sarah. It's a celebration. What's an anniversary dinner without a nightcap and some company? Nick stepped into the house, still unsure of what he was walking into. Hey, John, everything okay? Better than okay, John said cheerfully, pouring Nick a generous glass of wine. It's the big night. We've got wine, dinner, and, well, quite the finale in store. Nick looked around, his eyes darting between John and Sarah, sensing the tension that hung heavy in the air. I'm not sure what's going on here. John clapped him on the shoulder, grinning. Come on, Nick. Don't be shy. It's not every day you get invited to celebrate an anniversary with your neighbor's wife. He took a slow sip of his wine, letting the words sink in. Nick's face paled as realization dawned. He glanced at Sarah, who looked like she wanted to melt into the floor. John, still unfazed, leaned against the counter. But, I'm not really feeling up to the anniversary night of love anymore, so I figured I'd let you two continue without me. Nick's jaw dropped, and he looked at Sarah, who remained silent, her face tight with humiliation. John waved a hand dismissively. Oh, don't worry. I'll be out of your hair. I've got places to be. In fact, I won't be back until tomorrow at 9 a.m. We'll not get earlier, no worries. But please put on some clothes by that time. He paused for a moment, watching Nick's stunned expression before adding, And Nick, I suggest you not to waste time tomorrow and prepare for the flight to Hawaii. Nick sputtered, his wine glass shaking in his hand. Hawaii? John nodded, grinning like a cat that had caught a mouse. She'll fill you in. Sarah finally found her voice, her frustration breaking through. So that's it? You're just done with me? John turned to her, his smile faded, replaced by something colder, more resolute. Yes, Sarah, I'm done. But my lawyer's not. He'll handle everything else. He straightened his jacket, giving a quick glance around the room. You two should figure things out before the morning. Wouldn't want any loose ends hanging around. With that, John stepped outside, closing the door softly behind him, leaving Nick and Sarah in a stunned silence as the absurdity of the situation fully sank in. Some say revenge is best served cold, but John delivered it hot and absolutely satisfying. Thanks for watching this emotional story of love, lust, and lies. Hope it touched your heart. If you enjoyed it, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a fresh story every day. Love to hear your thoughts in the comments, so feel free to share your experiences and tell your story.